The universe, people have talked about this in the last week. The universe, it turns out, is an enormous expanse. Even to describe the universe requires some imagination. It requires a willingness to be a little bit overwhelmed. My friend Gavin, if you would please stand in the corner with your flashlight. Turn that on, please. If Gavin is at one end of the universe and I were to, if I could, stand at the other end of the universe over here, and he shined his flashlight, it would take 93 billion years for that light to get from Gavin all the way to me on the other side. Now, thank you, Gavin. I think that is a great job. Now, people who study these things say that's if the universe does not expand. Did you hear that? They say that the universe is getting bigger. Overwhelming. And the star that is closest to us is actually a cluster of stars called Centauri. And they are 4 light years away. In miles, that's about 24 trillion miles. Give or take an inch or two. It takes 4 years for light from that cluster of stars to get from there to here. 4 years. Fascinating. It's a little overwhelming, though, isn't it? Astronomers who have very powerful instruments and can observe things at great distances from us tell us that the light that they can observe from stars that are millions of light years away, much of it is coming from stars that may not even exist anymore, and yet the light is just now getting to us. I think that it's incredible and overwhelming, fascinating. But way out there with all of these hundreds and billions of stars that we are still discovering, that light in the darkness is only about 5% of everything we see. 95% of the universe as we know it is just dark, empty. I love this Psalm, number 8. It begins like this. And I imagine that whoever wrote Psalm number 8 had this experience of being overwhelmed while staring into the night sky. Because it begins like this. It says, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that, God, you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of us," right? Seriously. Consider the magnitude of the universe and just how minuscule and fleeting we are. It is awesome. And should be humbling. What is it that you really do care about us, God? There must be so many other things to concern you. So much more out there, but mostly, though, as I said, it's just dark. Nothing. And that kind of fascinates me too. Amanda, if you would, I'm going to have you stand up here, turn your microphone on, and do something with you. Do something with everyone. I'm going to teach you a couple of words if you haven't learned these already. Say this after me. Tohu.
Tohu.
Vabohu.
Vabohu.
Tohu vabohu.
Tohu
Okay,
vabohu.
now you got it. Now say it a little bit quietly together. Ready? Tohu vabohu.
Tohu vabohu.
Now I'll tell you what it means real quick, and then we'll have a little fun with this. This is ancient biblical Hebrew that you will find in the very first verses of the Bible. When God is brooding over the waters, is how some translations say it. But in Hebrew, it is God moved over the tohu vabohu. Yeah. Which might be understood as the swirling chaos, the darkness, the tohu vabohu. Now, we're going to kind of chant this quietly as Amanda leads us, but when I say my phrase, we're going to signal for everybody to quit.
Okay.
Ready? And you'll know the phrase because I'll,
Okay.
Go for it.
What am I doing?
Yeah. You're
Tohu vabohu. Tohu vabohu. Tohu vabohu. Tohu vabohu. Tohu vabohu. Tohu vabohu. Tohu vabohu.
Let
vabohu.
there
vabohu.
be
Tohu.
light. Thank you, Amanda.
You're welcome.
And God saw that the light was good. God separated the light from the darkness. This is really, I believe, what the Bible was meant to sound like in its opening. The tohu vabohu, and let there be light. Our language about faith then has been filled ever since with the words of light and dark. And the reality of the universe where we find ourselves is that there is actually very little light within it. Mostly, the vast mostly is dark. And when scriptures use the words of light and dark, same thing. This is always a metaphor. The same thing. There is always only very little light. So throughout the Bible, the little bit of light is always assigned this great responsibility to shine in the midst of what? Overwhelming darkness. God gives this high calling of being light unto all of the nations. God gives this high calling to one little gathering of tribes known as Israel, and says to them, "You shall be the light unto the nations." It's always a small flicker of a flame, isn't it? In the midst of the vast darkness. The Gospel of John opens with this kind of poem calling Jesus the Word, or the Logos in Greek. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God, which are astounding claims about Jesus. But it goes on. In him was life, and the life was the light unto all people. The light shines in the darkness, And the darkness did not overcome it. Which I think are really great words for any of us who might be struggling with the darkness of winter just about now. Absolute darkness. Have you ever actually experienced absolute darkness? There's a cave outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. They call it Raccoon Mountain. Under Raccoon Mountain is a series of caverns, and I went there once with a group of teenagers from church. We were outfitted with helmets and lanterns on the helmets, kind of like a coal miner might wear. We were led into the caverns, having to crawl from space to space, and our guide took us into what opened into a big muddy room where we could stand up. And she said, "Okay, everyone, turn off your lantern." Well, the sunshine outside was way behind us. We were under the earth, and there was no light anywhere. And as we stood there, she said, "Now, touch your nose with your finger." You'd be amazed at how hard that is. There it is. 2 guys in our group actually got dizzy and fell over. And then she said, "Turn on your lanterns." It was as bright as staring into the sun. We squinted and we blocked the light from a little flashlight. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but they will have the light of life." I had a friend in seminary. His name was Stephen. And we would often ride the bus together from our apartments to campus. And Stephen was blind from birth. So I was always fascinated when he would tell me about his love of sports, because he never missed a single Braves game or a Hawks game on the radio. I can't name 2 people in Atlanta that watch the Hawks. He knew every stat. He could describe the game in ways that were like painting a picture. He taught me a little bit along the way about how to be a guide for him when he was walking. He said, "I swing this, you better watch out because I swing this cane out in front of me. But if there is something up higher than my wrist, I will hit it. And that's what I need you to help me with. Limbs, low-hanging street signs." It is always interesting to see. A better word might be experience. It is always interesting to experience life through someone else's experience. I asked him once what it is like for him to study the scriptures about light and dark, about seeing and about being blind. And Stephen told me, well, there are times when it's not great to be actually blind and have your life compared to the wickedness and the sin and the ignorance of the world. He said that is actually not uplifting when you're blind. But he also said, to be honest, there's a great deal about being blind in the Bible that is right on the money. He said, especially how hard it is to walk without sight in a place where you have never been. I am the light of the world, Jesus said. When he was first gathering his disciples, making a name for himself, beginning his ministry in and around the place where he lived and grew up, Jesus went up on the side of a hill with his disciples, and a great crowd of people gathered there as well. And he spoke and gave a sermon that we call the Sermon on the Mount. And I think that it is Jesus' introductory message, the Jesus Manifesto, perhaps. We have the opportunity here in February to look at parts of this Sermon on the Mount together. After delivering what we call the Beatitudes, which you might even think of as Jesus' version of the 10 Commandments. After that, he said this: you are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand. And it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. I am the light of the world, he said. You are the light of the world. Small sources of light with such great responsibilities. It's a lot like the universe, I think. You and I, such small flickers of light. There's a disciples' church down in Gulfport, Mississippi. And when Hurricane Katrina came through, it was almost washed away entirely. I took a group of college students from Midway College several years ago on spring break for a mission trip there. We had a lot of work to do because there was a lot of damage. This is how these young people chose to spend their spring break, by the way, cleaning up after a hurricane. And we arrived in Gulfport, Mississippi, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 a.m. And it's just as dark as midnight at that hour. We could see the moon and the stars out over the Gulf of Mexico. It was stunning. Beautiful, peaceful even, serene. And there were no lights really, except the moon and the stars. Just us, the van, and the water. And so we all got out of the van, we sat down on the seawall, and we just waited for daylight. The sun crept up over the horizon. what was left, Gulfport, Mississippi, was revealed. Houses gone, churches gone, everything, McDonald's gone. There was even one of those big barge casinos gone. And we were standing right in the middle of devastation. And do you know that it was just beautiful before the sun came out? And all of that life had just been washed away. Light and dark, what a metaphor. Light reveals what is actually there, doesn't it? Darkness conceals it. What does he mean? What does he mean, really? What does Jesus mean? I am the light of the world and you are the light of the world. What is he saying? Salt of the earth, too, that's the stuff that preserves food when you don't have electricity or refrigerators. I imagine that is why Jesus talked about us being salt of the earth also, which is enough for another sermon. Salt of the earth, light of the world. He's talking about us. And do you know what it sounds like? It sounds like Jesus believes that the very world around us is depending on us for preservation and for seeing clearly where this should all be headed. I mean, this is such a high calling to have faith. And it sounds like Jesus believes that we are just that important. Think about that. That to God, we matter that much. Who? If that's true, who would ever put that lantern under the bushel basket?